My understanding sitting in Melrose Arch was actually it was a police area from Monday. That's one. And
I don't think
on
that's
the issue of management.
I don't think that's right, but
Okay.
the police certainly were in control, or thought they were in control, endeavouring to exercise control on the Thursday.
Yeah. And from the point of view of management, no, that's not me. I think it refers to the people who were on the mine at the Jock.
One of the problems the bishop had was he couldn't go, he wanted to go back to the Kopi to speak again to the strikers, and he was told he couldn't go because the police wouldn't let him. So,
Okay.
the police were purporting to exercise control, I think. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Is this question going to help us?
Yes.
I can understand if he was one of the management who'd given that express advice, then the question would have some future. But if he wasn't, he was in Melrose Arch, then I don't think it helps us, frankly.
Yes. I want to go then to the statement of Mr. Sidat. I'll come to the presence of Mr. Jamieson at the Jock on the day. This last statement is KK at paragraph 5.3, which is Mr. Sidat's statement. It's Sidat. It's also KK.
Okay, it's Mr. Kwali's statement. Which paragraph you want now?
James, see that statement is 0014.
0014, Mr. Chairman.
0014.
Yes. At paragraph 5.3. Now, this is a recollection of what they were informed by General Annandale. General Annandale informed us that the subs wanted to avoid the loss of life and that the crowd appeared to be well organized. One of the members of the team, I cannot recall, asked General Annandale how the subs intended to deal with the situation. General Annandale told us this was an operational matter and that they could not talk to us about it. You remember that?
I don't know what the question is with respect, Chair. We've now had statement upon statement read from witnesses, and this witness is unable to help us on that. So whether he's aware of this is not going to advance it.
Yes, well, Mr.
But some cross-examiners didn't start from others. Some put statements and then bring them all together. And I don't think we can stop him. But
Yes.
the real question I'd like to ask is this: where were you on the 16th?
Well, thank you.
Mr. Jamieson, where were you?
I drove from home, picked up Roger Phillimore, and then drove out to the mine.
So you were at the mine?
Yes. So
what time did you get there?
LPD.
What time did you get there?
Does it say in my statement?
No, I'm not asking you to say. What time?
Maybe
I don't
around
know.
about
Huh?
10, 10:30.
Half past 10, right. You were at the LPD.
Yes.
Were you at the Jock at all?
Yes, we went to visit the Jock around
How long
about
were you,
lunchtime.
How long were you at the Jock?
Maybe about an hour.
Now, this passage here that's being put to you
Yes.
about what General Annandale told, quote, us, unquote,
Right.
that's Mr. Sidat and others, that the SAPs wanted to avoid a loss of life.
Yes.
Unfortunately, they weren't able to do that. The crowd appeared to be very well organized, and when one of the members of the team, the opponent can't remember, Mr. Sidat can't remember who it was, asked General Annandale how the SAPs intended to deal with the situation, and General Annandale told us it was an SAPS operational matter which they couldn't talk to us about. Were you one of the people who are covered by the word us? Were you present when that conversation with General Annandale took place?
When I think what this is referring to, I didn't get Mr. Sidat's statement to read last night in my homework, so this is the first time I've seen this. I think what it's referring to is we went into the Jock, we got introduced to various police officials and what have you, and then various conversations about different parts of what was there. There was legal people there, there was negotiators there. They pointed out there was intelligence people there, and different conversations occurred at different times with the groups of people. I can't specifically remember that, but I can remember when we went outside with General Mbombo, she said something similar, basically.
Now, what time was it? Was it before 1:30?
It was around lunchtime that we were
Was
there.
it before 1:30?
Possibly.
You see, if it was before 1:30, the evidence indicates that General Annandale wouldn't have known how they intended to deal with the situation, because that was only going to be told to them by Colonel Scott later on.
I see.
Anyway, we
But
won't have to go there now.
Yeah, so my answer to that was no, I wasn't one of the us in that, but I was one of the us if it was said by General
The answer is
Mbombo.
you were told something along those lines by General Mbombo,
Yes.
you and a party, a number of others
Yes, yeah.
who were with you.
Yeah.
I think that lays the ground for your next question.
Yes. Now, paragraph 5.4 is in that same statement. And then he says, thereafter, the SABC Provincial Chief Commissioner General Bombo, who had just arrived by helicopter, addressed us. Now, presumably you were there. She said to us that SABC's first priority was to disarm the crowd in a manner which would avoid casualties and with public security at the forefront. She told us that SABC had developed a tactical disarmament plan with reference to the crowd. She said, if you give them a hand, they want the arm until you have no more to give, or words to that effect. You were clearly there when the statement was made, correct?
Perhaps read the next sentence too. General Mbombo did not share with us any detail of the manner in which SAPS would deal with the situation on the day. And if she just arrived by helicopter, it was before the 1:30 meeting, and on her own evidence, she didn't know how they were going to deal with it. But anyway, was this said to you? The passage that we're now looking at, does this relate to something General Mbombo said when you were present?
Yes, it does. This was outside the jock. There's a little sort of thatched larper that is there, and we walked out from there, and she was talking to a group of people under there. I didn't quite know what it meant, but I was there when she said it.
Yes. Now, when she says, if you give them a hand, they want the arm until you have no more to give, she was clearly referring to the strikers, wasn't she?
I don't know.
Yes. Now, it seems the understanding of SABS was that their role in part was to end the strike. The understanding of Mr. Kwadi and the understanding of Mr. Sidat was also that the role of SABS was to end the strike. And you seem to be the only one who has a different understanding. Can you explain why that is so?
Well, I wouldn't say I was the only one. Anyone who wasn't there in those conversations and present and party to them would also not understand. There was, I think, quite a few people apart from me who wasn't there. So I don't think Simon Scott would say he understood that. I don't think Roger Phillimore would say he understood that. We weren't there.
Well, as I understand, Mr. Phillimore was actually at the briefing with Ms. Mbombo on the 16th.
Well, if it was this same discussion, yes, it was. Yeah.
Now, if there was something wrong with the position that was taken by SABS and communicated to you by General Mbombo, surely someone from Lonmin would have objected.
Surely someone would. It would surely have been the people who had been there all week and had been involved in all the same conversations.
Well, you would also have objected if it was wrong.
No.
What exactly do you say was wrong?
Well, what was wrong is the understanding that seems to have been shared generally that the role of the SABS was to negotiate an end to the strike.
Was that an understanding that you were aware of?
No.
And was anything said in your presence which made you think that that was the way the police were expected to act?
No.
Now, can I ask you about...
Of course, sorry, just in fairness, I think there's a distinction that has to be drawn. You remember yesterday the witness explained that the evidence, according to his evidence, their information was people at, I think it was Eastern Platts, wanted to work, but they were afraid for their lives that they'd be either stabbed on the way or dealt with in the parking area when they got there. And a major concern of Lonmin was that law and order should be restored so that those who were passively participating in the strike out of fear for their lives, who wanted to go back to work, would be able to do so. Now that, in a sense, would have broken, at least partially, the strike, but it wouldn't have been a result of a positive action by the police in order to break the strike, if you understand what I mean. It's a distinction which we mustn't ignore. I'm not saying it's a total answer, but in fairness to the witness, one mustn't just put everything together as if it's one issue.
Yes. Now, can I ask you about your movements on the 16th? This is something you've just been asked briefly by the chairperson.
Yes.
You've told us you arrived at the jog at about 10 o'clock.
No, it was at about lunchtime.
You arrived at about lunchtime?
Yes.
Well, I mean, your statement...
Yeah, that's why I wanted to refer to it.
At page 15, paragraph 33.
Paragraph 33?
33, yes.
Yeah.
You say, on the morning of the 16th, I drove to Marikana with Philimo.
Yes.
So that took you the morning until lunchtime.
He said he got there earlier than that, as I understood. Yes. How long does it take you to get from Melrose, not Melrose, Melrose?
Hour and a half.
How long does it take you from Melrose Arch to
Yeah.
Marikana? Hour and a half.
Hour and 3/4, yeah.
And then you met with Scott, and there was a briefing. Was that a briefing that you got from Scott?
It was a briefing from the rest of the management that were based at the mine.
And you were not briefed by Scott?
Scott there refers to Simon Scott, not General
not,
Scott.
Not the Scott of the police. Now, then at paragraph 34, you refer to another, the arrival of General Mbombo.
Yes.
And was it explained to you what the SAPS wanted to do in relation to the strikers in this conversation?
No. I didn't actually know even who General Mbombo was until we were introduced to it.
You say it was never explained to you what the SAPS would do in relation to the strikers?
No, it was explained earlier in the week what the outline of the police plan was. I think as early as Monday or Tuesday. I think there's some handwritten notes of mine in the bundle that explain that they had an operation where they were going to bring a lot of police onto site. They were going to try and peacefully disarm the strikers. So that was explained, not directly from the police, it was explained to me by Mark Monroe over the telephone.
Now, at paragraph 36, you say you left at 15:30.
Yes.
You know that the operation started, I think, some 10 minutes thereafter.
Yes.
Why did you leave at 15:30?
I didn't have anything else to do and I was driving back home. I'd actually postponed some conference calls that I was supposed to have that afternoon with some bankers in London. And I was trying to leave to get home to take the calls from there.
Were you not aware that the operation was going to start a few minutes after your departure?
No, from when we were at the Jock, it was going to start this afternoon.
Chairman,
I think your time is up.
Yes.
If there's one little point you want to round off quickly, I won't be harsh with you.
No, Mr. Chairman.
But if this is the point you've made and you've covered the ground you want to cover, then I think you must stop. Am I right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Mr. Gotts, are you next?
Good morning, Chair. And
remind me, Mr. Wesley, how long Mr. Gotts has got, so both of us can remember. Maintain your record.
Good morning, Mr. Jamison. My name is Anthony Gotts. I'm going to be asking some questions on behalf of UMCU.
Morning.
Can I revert very briefly to this issue about the decision that was taken on the 10th of August 2012 that management would not meet and engage with the strikers? I'd like to take you to page 7 of your statement, which is dated 7 August 2012. I think this is exhibit quadruple V2. It's paragraph 14 on page 7 of the statement. Perhaps just to get some context, we can look very briefly at paragraph 13 on the previous page. You'll see there, Mr. Jamison, that you describe in quite some detail your discussions with Mr. Barnard Mokoena. You reveal that Mr. Mokoena informed you that there was an illegal gathering. People were intent on marching towards Lonman's main administration offices, the LPD. You say that you went into his office and you had a discussion with various people, including Mr. Khotle and Mr. Russo Bello, on speakerphone. You then describe how Barnard and you were given an overview of the developing situation. Towards the bottom of that paragraph, they say that it's revealed that the demands of the strikers related to the demands of the RDOs that had been given or been made at Korea. And then you turn to page 14.
Could we stop there?
Paragraph
Slight
14.
inaccuracy there.
Sorry, I beg your pardon?
I didn't go into Barnard's office, he came into mine.
Sure.
Very important in London to observe the protocols in that regard.
We too have similar protocols at the bar. Mr. Jamieson, what is quite remarkable about this paragraph is that nowhere do you reflect the fact that a decision was made either in that meeting or had been made that management would not talk to the strikers. Correct?
Correct.
And in fact, what happens then is that in paragraph 14, you make the most remarkable statement. On the top of page 7, you say, on a subsequent call, we heard that a delegation of the strikers had refused to come into the LPD offices to talk to management, as they demanded that management address them outside. And there seemed to be no list of demands or grievances. Now, Mr. Jamieson, you'll accept, I think, in the light of the discussions that various people have had with you, that these facts are incorrect.
Yes.
No.
Mr. Gotts, are you going to read the next sentence as well, or must I do it?
Well,
I don't want to take your cross-examination away from you, because I always enjoy it, but if you're not going to put that sentence,
I'm happy for you to take over at this point.
Taking
over is usually relatively more effective.
The question I want to ask, but if you're going to ask it already, you're going to ask it anyway, then I must sit back and enjoy hearing you ask it and get the answer you want or don't want, as the case may be.
Well, let me take it up at the next sentence then. You say, we left it that the management personnel on the ground would deal with the situation as they deemed fit and keep us updated. You'll agree with me, Mr. Jamieson, that the sense of this paragraph is that, in fact, it was the strikers who refused to come in and meet with management, not, as we know, that management had refused to meet with the strikers. And the second sense that is conveyed is that no such decision was taken. In fact, you left it up to the people on the ground to deal with the situation as they deemed fit. Now, none of that is correct. Isn't that so?
Part of it is correct. I mean, I can explain the bits that I think are incorrect and the bits that I think are correct.
Well, proceed. I don't want to interrupt.
I'd already said it was a fast-flowing discussion, and I was listening into it on the end of the telephone. And what I had to do when doing the statement was put myself back then and say, what did I understand? And that's what I understood at the time. However incorrect it was, that's what I understood. So this part that says the delegation of strikers had refused to come to LPD, I mean, that was clearly wrong. And I'll readily say yes, that was wrong. Subsequently, that I found out. On the area that says we left the management personnel on the ground would deal with the situation as they deem fit. Clearly, these decisions have been taken, as we saw from Barnard's supplementary statement. There had been some earlier discussion that there would be no talking to the strikers. The bit I agreed to, yes, there was I did by omission or by non-objection go along with that. The bit that was that refers to is there was a discussion about whether the people in the office should go out and meet them or not. I can recall that. And I've had some personal experience of doing that. And therefore, my sense of that was that the people who are there have to make the call if they want to go or not. I've been out to groups of hundreds or thousands and received memorandums and discussed grievances. But it's always been your personal decision to do that. No one can instruct you because there's a safety aspect to it. And I know we heard that it was relatively peaceful. But regardless of that, my view is that the people who are there make that decision whether they'll do it or not. So that's what that bit referred to. Is that okay?
Chair, I've finished with that point relating to
I want
that
to
sentence.
ask a question. Thank you. I thought you were going to make the point I'm not going to make. The second last sentence, the penultimate sentence of that paragraph, is actually very misleading. Because, this is prima facie, obviously, that's why I'm putting it to get the benefit of your inputs. It suggests that the management personnel on the ground, as they described, had a free hand to deal with the situation. That wasn't true. The most important restriction had been imposed, whether it was imposed or they agreed to it, but really neither here nor there. But the fact is, a very significant restriction had been imposed. You can deal with it as you deem fit, but you're not allowed to negotiate. Because it's the policy decision taken, we're not going to negotiate with these people. Is that right?
Yes.
But that was a very significant qualification,
Yes.
which should have been introduced into the penultimate sentence.
Well, as I explained in the distinction of this morning about how the decision was made. So,
But that,
by omission or not.
That's not going to work.
Yeah.
There was a discussion on the telephone. Those at Marikana and those at Melrose Arch were talking, the two groups of people.
Yes.
And it was agreed between them that there would be no negotiation.
Yes.
That wasn't left. You people in Melrose Arch didn't say, by the way, you chaps at Marikana got free hand, you can do what you like. That wasn't said.
Well, us people in Melrose Arch aren't in charge of those people.
No. But what was agreed,
Yes.
what was agreed was, and this was an agreement from both sides, that we don't negotiate with these people. You don't negotiate.
Correct.
That was a very significant qualification. And the penultimate paragraph is significantly misleading because that qualification is not there. Isn't that right?
Well, who would have come back to whom there? As I explained, my interest there was about the...
Yeah.
Well, if I can finish.
Sorry, yes, please carry on.
If my interest in this was that there was a work stoppage and how it might affect customers and deliveries.
No, I understand.
So when they said, they'll come back to us, Barnard went back out to work at his hot desk, and I imagined that if they had any further things that they wanted to come back on, they'd come back to Barnard. Why would they come back to me? It's not my decision. Barnard's dealing with it. That's what this means. So don't get the impression that we were sitting there waiting for them to come back to us. We were intent on making another decision.
I'm
we
not
were caucusing around that.
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting that, Mr. Jones. What the sentence suggests is the people on the ground at Marikana had a free hand, and they didn't have a free hand, did they? They didn't have a free hand on a significant area as to whether they could enter into negotiations of any kind.
Agreed.
That must be right.
Agreed.
Okay.
Perhaps just to close off this point, and it may be in fairness to you, can we look at quadruple E19, which is the Lonman logbook? It's an entry for the 10th of August 2012, 10:08, and the entry will be at 13:58.
Particular entry you want us to look at, Mr. Watts?
It's at the entry at 13:58.
Well, that's on the that's a bit higher up. Yes.
Bottom of the previous page.
There we go. Yes.
Oh, sorry, I beg your
Yes,
pardon.
it starts actually with debrief by GS.
It's on the next page,
And
yes.
It's on the next page, and it goes on. It's quite a long entry.
See, third line from the top, you say, or it said, management can't make decisions sitting in the office. They must allow people on the ground to make decision. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, I mean, obviously subject to what the chairperson has put to you, seems to be relatively clear that management did understand that they had some discretion. Or am I completely wrong?
I think I'll make the distinction of which management are they talking about and which management sitting in which offices and who are the people on the ground. So if you can explain that, I can perhaps answer.
Let me return to the point at a later stage. There's something that I simply wanted to highlight for you.
Okay.
I'm interested in a slightly different question, Mr. Jamieson, and that's the fact that there seem to be, at this stage, a number of quite significant decisions that are taken, including members of EXCO, and therefore by Lonman itself, for which there are absolutely no records or no minutes of that decision. And the decision not to engage with the strikers at this moment is one of those decisions, correct?
So which question are you asking me? that there were no records taken, or there was
There
this
are
decision?
no records of this decision that we've been talking about, the decision not to engage with the strikers.
Well, it was an ad hoc call, as I understand it. And on ad hoc calls, you don't take minutes or keep records.
Another important decision was taken virtually at the same time, and that decision was the one to apply to the Labour Court for an urgent interdict. That decision seems to have been taken by senior management, for which there's no record.
There'd probably be a record in the Labour Court.
No, I'm talking about the fact that there is no minuted record of that decision.
I don't think there was any minuted records of the previous ones that we've taken as well. If you go backwards on previous unprotected strikes, it's almost like it's a procedure that swings into action every time it happens. The people at the mine phone our legal advisors, and that process starts. I think they go hand in hand.
Mr. Gotts, no, I take it in the Labour Court papers, there'll be a founding affidavit. And the founding affidavit, I think we've actually got it somewhere, but we've got so many exhibits in the sea, I can't lay my hand on it immediately. Certainly got the order, and I think we got the founding affidavit. The founding affidavit should have a paragraph indicating the authority of the deponent to the founding affidavit. And normally, what happens, I don't know whether it happened on this occasion, you can perhaps tell us, or someone else can tell us, there was normally a copy of a resolution of the board or of some committee with delegated authority from the board to institute this particular litigation. So if I'm correct in saying that, then I assume that he's right, that in the records of the Labour Court, as he puts it, there will be, or should be, one would expect there to be, a copy of a resolution taken by somebody, probably not the board, but I take it a body with delegated authority to institute those proceedings. Am I right?
Chair, I certainly haven't seen any, but I do stand to be corrected. Chair, I don't want to be making the point, and I need to be clear about this. I'm not making the point that that decision was unauthorized, either by way of delegated authority previously.
You're making a more general point,
yeah,
that decisions which you say were quite important decisions of the EXCO, there's no paper backing them up.
Yes.
Which you would expect to be the case. I take it that's your point, is it?
Yes, indeed.
And the witness answer on this particular one you put to him was to say, well, ad hoc decisions taken as a result of conference calls are not recorded on paper. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chairman. One qualification, which was it wasn't an EXCO call.
You're saying that wasn't a decision taken by EXCO to institute the application for an interdict?
No, my understanding, I think the question you asked was not to talk to the strikers was an EXCO decision. So that decision, as you call it, not to talk to strikers, I think I've answered previously. My understanding, and I'm not an HR expert, is that it's actually the default position. If someone's on an unprotected strike, your first position is you don't talk to them. And especially as this was an escalation, this wasn't an isolated incident, a new incident. It was an escalation of what had happened at Karee Mine before. And as I described it in an analogy to Mrs. Pillay, was tantamount to someone at Mike DaCosta's court not liking the decision they got. They had no grounds for appeal, but they chose to march to the appeal court and demands to see anyone who was in the office to hear their appeal that there was no grounds for. That was the analogy I used with Mrs. Pillay. And it's the analogy I would stick to. So the default position is you don't talk to them.
Well,
it's not a decision that's affirmatively made by management, EXCO board, or anyone else.
Let's look at something a bit more direct than an analogy which may cause more darkness than light. And that is you had a particular protocol which set out the standard way of dealing with unprotected strikes. That was, I would have thought, the default position. And we've got, it's an exhibit. I take it Mr. Gotts is going to come to.
It was the procedure that went up, I think, yesterday.
Yes, and that actually talks about how you expect the unprotected strikers to form a grievance committee, and you have negotiations with them and so on. There's one thing is absolutely clear, that protocol does not say you don't negotiate with unprotected strikers. It says precisely the opposite. Isn't that right?
Correct.
So that's the default position, surely?
Well, when that was put up yesterday, as I said, wasn't aware of it. And when I read Barnard's supplementary statement last night, I presumed that all those things were actually discussed and those options were discussed and that was what they come to. So when we talked on the call and the words were something like, well, we're not going to talk to them, no, we're not going to talk to them. So you say that's a decision and I was part of it. I don't back away from that. But I now see that possibly there was a lot more discussed prior to that call, which I wasn't party to, so I didn't know about it.
That Mr. Gott is making is you can't justify the decision on the basis of the default position. You've got to do it the other way around. Right. You've got to say the default position was talk. We decided, you weren't a party to it, but you say there were previous discussions you weren't a party to, but we decided, or someone before you decided, that we wouldn't comply with the default position. I mean, that's the true position, isn't it?
Yes, but
must be.
With the qualification, I wasn't aware
No, I said that.
Part of the default position. I'm aware of the default position.
Yeah, all right. Mr. Gott, sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, you've made the point I wanted to make, Chair. Can I move on then?
I'm sorry.
No.
I didn't intend to.
Please don't
make a point for you.
apologize, Chair. Can I move on to a related theme, and that's what arises from your supplementary statement of 3 September 2014, which I understand is Exhibit Quadruple V3. Mr. Jamieson, can you tell the commissioners why you produced the statement? How did it come about that you produced the statement?
I was asked by Fiona Lepan that there had been a request from the evidence leaders to explain Lonmin's position with respect to why we don't minute weekly EXCO calls and ad hoc calls and what have you. And that the discussion ensued. I said, well, why don't you get the company secretary to write that affidavit? And what she said was that, well, the company secretary is not going to give evidence, you are. You know, it's not a big deal. It's perfectly explainable. Why don't you write and do the affidavit and answer questions on it, which I'm quite happy to and can.
Can I give you a little bit more background and see whether you know these facts, because I think that they're relatively important. Lonmin initially provided the minutes that you see referred to in paragraphs 2.2.2 through to 2.2.4 of the supplementary statement. They provided those minutes in heavily redacted form. Only a couple of paragraphs of those minutes were in fact revealed to the commissioners and the parties, correct?
Yes.
As a consequence of a concern that there may be other relevant information, UMCU's legal representatives asked to have sight of the unredacted minutes. Are you aware of that?
No.
What happened then is that we went to inspect the unredacted minutes, and it became clear from the inspection that there were certain documents which were referred to in the minutes which we had not yet seen. One of those sets of documents were board packs, which we were then subsequently given access to. And it also appeared to us from the last minute that there was a meeting of the executive committee that was scheduled for August of 2012. And we said, well, it may be relevant to have sight of that minute. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I think I am. Fiona asked me, did that meeting take place? And I said, I don't think it did, not to my recollection. What we did after, probably from about the 19th onwards or something like that, we actually just started to make minutes of all of the meetings, and that was at the instruction of the legal department because the president had announced the terms of the inquiry, and it was deemed prudent from then on we should keep minutes. But I don't, when you refer to that particular August meeting, I think you're meaning the regular monthly August EXCO meeting. And I actually can't remember, maybe it's in here whether that occurred or not.
It was scheduled, I think, to occur on the 27th of August, and so may have been caught up in many of these other developments. But
and probably was no need to actually have it because we were now having these almost daily EXCO calls.
So what then happened, Mr. Jamieson, is that we were provided with the minutes of the Executive Committee discussions, which commenced on the 19th of August and ran through to the, I think it's the 17th of September, and those appear from pages 87 to 123 of your bundle of documents, which is Exhibit Quadruple V1. Is that correct?
Correct.
But then it struck us that what we had was a minute of the 19th of July, 2012, and a set of minutes commencing on the 19th of August, for which there seemed to be 20 minutes in the month running from the 20th of the 19th of August through to the 17th of September. And we said to your legal representatives and to the evidence leaders, but hang on, there's a month where there is absolutely no record of any decision taken by Lonmin. Are you aware of that?
Am I aware of your discussion on it, or am I aware that there's no minutes?
Well, both.
I'm not aware of your discussion on it, but I'm aware of there were no minutes because there was no commission during that time.
And so the reason for your supplementary affidavit came about because you were specifically requested by my learned friend, Mr. Budlander, to explain this apparent anomaly of a month having gone by when we see minutes both prior to and subsequent to that month, when, despite the fact that there are important decisions having affected the company having been taken, there are no records of those decisions. You were requested in the light of that to attest to your supplementary affidavit, correct?
No, that's not correct.
What is incorrect in what I've said?
Mr. Budlander didn't request me. It was Fiona Lepan, but I understand it came from the evidence leaders. That's the first thing. Second thing is we weren't requested to explain why we took no minutes in a particular period. It was why did we take no minutes of ad hoc informal EXCO calls, which is what this deals with. And as I've already said, the reason for taking minutes after the events on the 16th, starting from the 19th, was because the terms of reference of the Commission had been announced, and before that there was no terms of reference of the Commission, and that's when we commenced to take them from, at the advice of our legal department.
You understood that what you were asked to address was why there was no documentary record of any EXCO meetings or discussions, formal or informal, during the period 20 July through to 18 August 2012, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm not sure that your statement actually addresses that question, Mr. Jamison. In fact, it evades that question. What we find in your supplementary affidavit is no explanation of all as to why those documents, why those decisions were not minuted.
I can tell you now.
Go ahead.
Well, there's no records going back 10 years of any EXCO weekly informal calls. But quite apart from that, the calls were instituted by Ian Farmer when he became CEO, which would have been late in August in 2008. Before that, they didn't occur. So in Brad Mills' time, they didn't occur. Ian brought them in, and we had them pretty much every week from then on. And they were, the way I describe them is if you can remember the old LA Law type soap opera, where the partners would sit around the table once a week or in the morning or whatever it is, and each of them would relate important things that were going on in their areas. I mean, on the TV, it looked like a 5-minute meeting, but I'm sure it was a bit longer than that. And that was the type of thing. It was a quick update, fast, what's this going? If there was important decisions that I can recall, they would be occasionally later minuted as part of the monthly EXCO meeting. So Ian would say, look, we took this decision on that call. I think it's important we record it. So, Peter, can you record that along with the others? And I think you'll probably find, if you go back far enough, you might find some instances of that. So where you're saying, why was there no specifically any minutes taken in the period 19th of July to 19th of August. The context is there was never ever any minutes taken of those meetings.
So what you're saying to us, as I understand it, is that despite the fact that there are important decisions that were taken, in particular during that week of the 9th of August through to the 16th of August, that there is no company record of the discussions that occurred and the ultimate decisions that were taken.
There's no formal company record. I think what's been submitted is a whole lot of emails that inform that time. And I believe that in there are some notes that I took of probably two of the meetings, I think. And the reason for me taking those handwritten notes that you'll see and then doing the notes for Simon and Roger is that when Ian was absent or Simon was absent, next person on the list to chair the meetings and take notes and then brief them was me. So I took those notes for that purpose.
Have you asked Mr. McQueen, or has Mr. McQueen been asked, to the best of your knowledge, whether he took notes of any of the decisions that were taken?
I don't know, no.
There certainly were meetings or discussions of an important nature that happened after the 10th of August, correct?
Yes.
You refer in your statement to meetings and discussions that happened in the weekend of the 11th and 12th of August.
Correct.
At that, during those discussions, it seems to us, reading from your statement, that an important decision was taken that you would be tasked with ensuring that police presence on the mine be increased dramatically, correct?
Correct.
Sorry, perhaps we can just go to that paragraph of your witness statement just to provide us with context. It's paragraph 17 of your statement of the 7th of August, and that's quadruple V2.
Yes, page 7.
Yes, if you just... So you were designated to try to make contact with the DG of the DMR, correct?
Correct.
Was there a discussion about what the content of your email to the DG should entail?
I'd have to just go back one step, if I could, and just give you how that arose.
Sure.
There was, can't be specific, but it appears to me that it was probably on a call on the 11th of August, which was the Saturday. There was a brief exchange on the call where I'd said to Frank Rusabello, in what way can I help? Is there anything you want me to do? And there had been some mention of a slow response from SAPS. They couldn't get the numbers they wanted on site. They were worried about that. And I said, perhaps, I could draft a letter for Ian or something like that to a senior police officer and organise for him to sign it and send it off to them in some way, shape or form. That was a suggestion that was made. The guys at the mine said, no, don't do that. We don't want you to do that, Albert. Leave that with us. There's a sort of protocol for escalating things with SAPS, so we don't want to put people's noses out of joint. Words to that effect. And I said, what else can I help with? What about with the DMR? We'd had the MIGDET meetings. I'd met the DG, and therefore, could we, might that help? And they said, yes, certainly. If you can do that, that'd be great. So between whenever that call was and before the call on the 12th, I'd spoken to Barnard and spoken to Frank independently. And from the security reports that were circulated by email, just put this email together. That's what happened. And then I sent it off. And on the call on the 12th, kind of reported back I'd done what I was asked to do. And I'd circulated that email around to the EXCO people as well, so that they could see what I'd done.
The next thing that you did as part of your initiative, and I understand that this may have been in consultation with Mr. Farmer, was address a letter to the Minister of Minerals and Energy, Susan Shabangu.
That's correct, yes.
Was there discussion relating to the content of that letter, or was that something that you decided on by yourself?
No, it was Ian. So, and there was a discussion on that that I had with him, and there's a few of the handwritten notes that you'll see that I submitted. There's some points there that Ian raised he thought should go into the letter, and thereafter it was circulated to him, to Roger, and to the rest of the EXCO members to say, are you okay with this? This is what I've sort of put together from all the notes and the calls and what have you. It was originally going to be signed by Ian, so it would have subsequently been sent over to him to sign and then send on. But right in, two things occurred in the formulation of that letter. One is that we became aware that the police officer had been killed, and well, at the time I didn't know. I thought it was one striker, but it ended up that there was, I think, 3 that were killed in that altercation. So that caused some revision to it. And the second thing was that Ian was hospitalised and said, and therefore he couldn't sign it. So that was, it actually took quite a period of time, a longer period of time than we wanted to put that letter together.
You've answered my question, Mr. Jamieson, which was effectively that this was something that was circulated to the EXCO members and effectively signed off by all members of EXCO, even though you were the signatory on the document itself.
Yes, I can recall, I think I probably sent it around and said, this thing's late already. Please try and get back with any comments as soon as you can. If you don't, then I'll assume that you're happy with it and I'll send it off.
It appears to us, reading between the lines, and you must forgive me, Mr. Jamieson, if we had a proper documentary record of decisions taken and discussions, probably a lot of this would be unnecessary. But it does seem to us that around that time, you became quite concerned, indeed all members of EXCO became quite concerned about what could be called appropriate messaging. It's a term that you use. My learned friend, Mr. Mpofu, would probably call it spin, but in your terminology, it would be regarded as appropriate messaging, correct?
Correct. Was that to do with Ian's condition?
Well, Ian's condition being one of them,
right.
But another aspect of that appropriate messaging was that the situation should be characterized as not being an IR issue, correct?
Correct, yes.
I don't want to take you in great detail to those topics because they have been dealt with in some detail by other parties, but just to perhaps summarize what the position was at the time. As I understand it, there was a concern amongst members of EXCO, but particularly you, that consistent and appropriate messaging should be sent out to players who could have some influence over the situation, and that message that was sent across was that this should not be characterized as an IR issue, correct?
That's with one correction, and I think we've dealt with this at length when you said members of EXCO and particularly me. The way it started was it was particularly the people at the mine on the ground and non-particularly me, but I was tasked to escalate it because they thought it would be helpful. But I won't back away from the fact that I agreed with their concern and also with their characterization. But we keep coming back to this insistence, or however you want to characterize it, or obsession, and that's just not the case. It's not true.
Please don't be concerned about that. I'm not concerned whether it's an insistence or an obsession. I'm simply interested in establishing the facts that it was part of the appropriate messaging, and I think you've answered it fairly, was part of the appropriate messaging by Lonmin EXCO, that this not be characterized as an IR issue? And I think you've answered that, Mr. Jamison.
Yes, it was important to characterise it as violence.
No, Mr. Jamison, sorry, I don't want to fence with you. The important messaging was partly that, but it was to characterize it as not being an IR issue, correct?
No, it's not the important messaging. I thought you said it's the appropriate messaging. And the appropriate messaging for this head of the double-headed nature of the situation was that it was violent, it was not an orderly situation, there was killings and murder. And that was what was happening on that particular issue. There's another issue, which is a labour dispute, and that should be characterised differently.
Mr. Jamison, let's just see whether we can cut through this. You would agree with me that the genesis of the situation that you were experiencing at Lonman in that week of the 9th of August through to the 16th of August was effectively a wage issue, correct?
No, not correct, and I wouldn't agree with you, and I didn't agree with Mr. Mpofu either. But I don't think you were here yesterday, or maybe you were.
Well, I'm not sure that Mr. Mpofu dealt with this in great detail.
Mpofu did deal with it in fair detail. And there were these analogies which we may ultimately find not to be helpful about hybrids and hydras and mules and Siamese twins and all that. And then I introduced another one, which is a sort of two-pony cart. I think I preferred now this morning. I thought about two-pony carriage, and the one pony was the labour dispute pony, and the other one was the criminal activity pony. Anyway, we went into that in some detail. I don't know if we have to go through that again. It was bad enough yesterday. It would be painful to do it again today. But if there are points you want to ask about it, may I suggest you ask them after tea, unless you prefer to round off before we take the first tea, Jeremy? I'm in your hands.
No, let me continue after the 15-minute break. Thank you, Chair.
15-minute break. I'll ask you, sorry, I know you got 2 hours. You said you probably wouldn't need more than one. I think it's important for Mr. Berger to know how long after the tea break you think. I know it depends on interruptions from me and along with answers from the witness and so on, but factoring that in, can you give us a kind of a forecast as to how long you're likely to be?
Chair, given the revelations that Mr. Mpofu dealt with this topic extensively, I'm not sure that I need more than 15 minutes to wrap up matters.
I take it Mr. Berger will be grateful for that information. We'll now take the first comfort break.